Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. We are going to be talking about Star Wars Visions, Season 2. May the 4th be with you all. This was a nice drop here on Disney Plus, all 9 episodes. And we can't wait to talk about all these episodes. Before we do so, make sure you're hitting that like button, you're subscribing to the channel, you're commenting below, letting us know both what you think of our thoughts on Star Wars Visions Season 2 and your thoughts. We'll have some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episodes, probably you should watch those and then come back. We're going to do this review in a kind of ranking style. We're going to go back and forth, giving each other our number 9 all the way through number 1 instead of just one generic overall review of the season, because each one is such a unique short film. We felt this was the best way to do it. At the end, we'll give you a score for the season as a whole. All right, Sanak, I'm going to pass it over to you. What was your 9th place episode, or your least favorite one of season 2 of Star Wars Visions?
So for my number 9, I'm going with The Pit. I think it is a pretty solid episode. It has a collaboration with Lucasfilm, so I had a little bit more extra hopes for it, storytelling wise. It's fine. I think some of the art is a little simplistic, and the message behind it is solid, but it's simple, and I think the rest of these shorts had something a little bit more than simplicity to it.
My number 9 was episode 7, The Bandits of Golak. I think personally for me, this was an episode I really appreciated for the way it incorporated cultural visual design. On the flip side, it was the only 3D animated one, and I felt a lot of the limits of 3D animation here. The characters move very slow in a season that was very auteuristically designed, I would say, with the way the filmmakers were able to use a lot of different variations of animation. This one felt the most standard, like something I could see in the US or we've seen. It's kind of like a Clone Wars-esque style, animation style. Thought it was a nice story. Again, I loved the use of Inquisitors and Purge Troopers and stuff like that. But for me, the story was simple enough to where it didn't rise above a pretty limited animation style.
My number 8 is actually The Sith. I thought it was a fun opener. It reminded me a lot of The Duel in that it is visually stunning, but it was just not a story that I cared too much for. The fight itself was pretty fun. The visual popping and the understanding of emotions is all really cool. But I don't know, it was just one of those things that I think when I tasted it, it was great, and then it just disappeared for me.
Number 8 is The Pit. Like Senex said, I felt this was very visually tame. That was my main note. In a season, especially compared to last season's wide variety of Japanese animation, this was an episode that did not really do anything too visually impressive. I thought the story was nice. The characters worked well. The brother-sister relationship, I think, works well in Star Wars. It was a bit traditional. However, I did think the main character's death was a surprising moment and a little bit of a dark moment. And I think that's what bumped it up a little bit for me.
For my number 7, I went with I Am Your Mother. I think it's fun. I like the claymation style. It is very iconic, and I think the humor worked pretty well. And there is a bit of sweetness there that I really appreciated, and some Easter eggs like the mantis being one of the ships and all that. But it is just one of those stories that it's just more of like, let's bring this famous studio's humor into Star Wars and run with it instead of a story and a short in of itself. Pretty tame in that sense, but the humor was spot on for me, and I like the Easter eggs.
That's my number 7 as well, episode 4, I Am Your Mother from Ardman. This was an episode I was very excited for, and I did appreciate the humor here. Maybe not as British as it usually is, I would say, but I thought it worked well. I liked seeing like Wedge Antilles and claymation, and it was creative in its use of Star Wars iconography, but it is, out of all the episodes, probably the simplest story told.
For my number 6, I went with Ao Song. I thought I really enjoyed it. It is very sweet. I like the more fuzzier animation. There's a beauty to it that I don't think the rest of these shorts had. Probably the most grounded Jedi that we kind of get in this entire season. The concept of the Kyber singing and the purification is straight out of canon, and seeing it kind of taken to another step was really something I really enjoyed. It is sometimes just a little too sweet for me. I do enjoy my wrinkles of darkness in Star Wars, and this one is pretty much lacking all that. That's the only negative per se, but I enjoyed it. It just happens to be that there's others I enjoyed a little bit more.
My number six is episode three in the stars. Absolutely incredible animation. Absolutely loved it. Stop motion is one of my favorite art forms. So I was blown away by what they were able to do here. That the exposition was pretty heavy handed in this episode. But other than that, the animation is what raises it up for me. I think this is one of the weaker stories, in my opinion, but love the animation. Loved the use of Star Wars iconography to tell an environmentalist story. It's a story that I think bites off a bit more than it can chew at times, but visually very impressive.
I have it just slightly higher as my number five. Really like In the Stars for its real world connotations, its strong connections to a lot of South American history. It does come off as a little annoying, especially with the youngest child in the short kind of just saying, I can do everything, and everything not going that way. I do think it at least builds up a satisfying twist, but its ending was actually kind of shocking for me because I didn't realize it at first. But you see one star in the depiction of the story, and then you see three stars. And I'm not going to explain that in case you don't know what I'm referring to, but I think that does hint at a very specific ending for these characters, which I thought was pretty bold choice and allows others to kind of skim over and be happy with the ending regardless.
My number five is episode six, The Spy Dancer. This was a very unique episode. I think storytelling wise, arguably the most unique of all of these. The animation style wasn't my favorite, but I did appreciate the uniqueness of it. It's a very simple style, but I think it works effectively for the story they're trying to tell. I did feel for the characters. So, unique style, cool story, and great characters.
My number four was actually Bandits of Golak. I actually really enjoyed that. I mean, I am also from an Indian background, so there are obviously some weaknesses compared to what we see in something comparable art style wise, like the Clone Wars, and it does definitely feel like it is using some of those models as well. Star Wars has always had a rich connection to Indian culture and religion. I like a little bit more of the cultural, traditional, and like the practical garb and the color of the country and traditions kind of coming into this story here. At times, it is a little on the nose, but I think it has the best duel out of the entire series for me. There's a sweetness here between the brother and sister that I think was missing in the stars. Maybe it is a little bit because I am also Indian, but I guess everything working here for me finally kind of pushed it up for me.
And my number four is episode nine, Ao's Song. Same reason that I've liked a lot of these. I think season two for me was the how visually impressive is your animation season. This one really, really impressed me. It is a felt looking style almost, stop motion. I thought the use of lighting here was really, really impressive. There's one shot that's from inside O's hut. She and her dad are standing out there, and the way it's lit was incredible. Very cute story. Usually I do go for the darker stories, but I did like this one. I felt for the characters, and I think by the time it was over, I was like, I would watch more of this.
My number three, though, is Journey to the Dark Head. I know from looking online, a lot of the discourse is like this is like a worthy like Night Jedi equivalent for this season. It has fairly similar art styles. I do like the protagonists and their dynamic a little bit. They have interesting backstories. This one doesn't feel as rich as the Night Jedi for me. This one has some really interesting world building, really interesting concepts, but then it kind of just defaults to more typical anime tropes on characters. I thought the boy and the girl just didn't really have as much chemistry as they should have. I liked where it ends. It definitely hints at what could come out of this, but this definitely felt more like a tease and a taste. I like what it was showing more than it was saying.
My third favorite episode was the first episode, The Sith. I thought Sith was one of the most visually impressive animated pieces I've seen in a long time. A really nice use of both 3D animation, but with cell shading and color. A lot of these episodes try to use color, but I think this one uses it the best out of all of them. I do like Sith stories. I like Dark Side. I thought it was cool to see a Sith character who's tried to leave the Sith. I think that harkens back to maybe stories we could see in the times of the Old Republic. I thought it was cool to see Sith versus Sith. I like the contrast of when she kills the master, that the master's like, oh, you've completed your journey, you have become the Sith master because you're the apprentice and you killed me. But for her, it's something else. I don't know if the characterization was strong enough to make me want to watch more, but visually I wanted more. I thought this could go on forever with the different types of ways they could use art and experiments. I think the story is a little weak and bland. That's why it sits at 3 for me. But without a doubt, I think this is the most visually impressive short of all of them.
My number two, and that's the Spy Dancer. Again, like you mentioned, Liam, I don't think this is the most classically rich animation style, but it is extremely fluid. It does almost jump the shark a little bit at the end with the woman saying, "Oh, you're my son," and the whole time she's thinking it's the guy who took away her son. The concept of like combining like French resistance, cabaret into something that is Star Wars, something that is very much like how do you fight against the imperial might, against fascism in your own way with your own tools, I thought was unique. Like any good Star Wars story pulls from something real and then presents it in a very Star Warsy way. And I really enjoyed it for that. I honestly wish I could see a continuation of this story. Plus, I also really like the frog guy who is just like very mellow and just making beats.
My number 2, I have Journey to the Dark Head. Definitely can see the comparison between it and The Ninth Jedi in terms of trying to tell an actual story in the 20 minutes. It's not experimenting with form, it's not experimenting with Star Wars iconography and places. This is the one that actually wants to tell you a full on new Star Wars story in a new section of the Star Wars universe. It really wants to expand the lore, tell the lore, do all that stuff. More so than The Ninth Jedi, it relies on more traditional Star Wars concepts like the Padawan struggling with light side versus dark side. It is not as expansive in its world building as The Ninth Jedi, for where The Ninth Jedi kind of was more tame in style than Journey to the Dark Head. I think Journey to the Dark Head is more visually impressive. It's brighter, it's bigger, it's bolder. It's like a combination of the Ninth Jedi and the twins. The Ninth Jedi spends a bit more time with its characters explaining the world. This is more just like there's a war between the Jedi and Sith. I think it's a bit more simple, but it did leave enough seeds to where I was intrigued by the future seer people, like the way they're able to look at these stones with water and like what is their culture, what's their relationship to the Force, all of that. I wanted to know more about all that. I did find the lightsaber duels very exciting. Probably my favorite lightsaber duels of the entire season. I thought all of it worked really well. Story that definitely tries to be big and bold and fit into Star Wars. And that's personally something I really, really like.
My number one, because it takes what we expect, what we've grown out of in Star Wars, and makes it a very compelling argument. And that for me is Screecher's Reach. Visually, it's very sound. I love that they're playing around with parts here and there. They're keeping it safe on the more smaller moments where the characters talk, but when they kind of go through these visions, through these hauntings almost, it's incredible. The Screecher itself I think was a great design. The opening I thought was pretty cool. It almost reminded me of like ancient glyphs. Really, it was the ending, because it takes like these characters who have this calling. She has a calling for something more, something greater, and her friends are supportive of that. But when she actually comes to that point, and it's basically she's led into the arms of a Sith, and her friends support her. And it's strange because in a galaxy that is so large in Star Wars, that it continuously has new pockets explored, new planets, new civilizations, new species, new force interpretations. It feels like the people who get called to these greater purposes end up always being on the right side, on the good side. But in a very large galaxy that is constantly torn apart by war and strife and warring species and governments, more than likely you would fall into the hands of someone more evil, more treacherous, more dark. I like the inverse of a lot of these Star Wars stories that we've known. We end right where the realization is that's not necessarily a good thing. And that's why I loved it. And it also looked great at the end of the day. I really enjoyed it. Again, the format from the beginning to the end. It made its choices and experiments when it was best for its story.
completely agree with that as well. It's my number one. This is from Cartoon Saloon from Ireland, and they've done a variety of films that have been nominated for Best Animated Feature recently, like Wolf Walkers, Secret of the Kells. There are a lot of really impressive films that they've worked on, and so this was probably one of my more anticipated releases. At first, it's kind of unassuming, I would say. It starts, it's a kid's story. It's about these kids going to a mountain, but like you said, the twist, the fact that not only is the girl what she's battling, this ghost, I was expecting a story about conquering your fears and standing up to these visions of darkness, and it wouldn't actually be real. But no, she conquers her fear by becoming a Sith apprentice. She defeats her demon and then ultimately becomes one herself. I thought that was a really strong and cool twist. I thought the use of color was also really impressive. The line work and the shadows were really incredible. The way they were able to use the penciling on the creature itself was really, really, really amazing. It looked like you were looking at a comic book, but one that hadn't been colored yet, like something that was completely done in pencils and ink. I loved it. I thought that was awesome. And seeing the character follow through on the darkness of the story, I thought was quite impressive. Also reminded me a lot of kind of the journey of Darth Zana, the way she transitions from her familial roots and like being a kid who is discovered by Darth Bane, and the way he's able to manipulate and twist her into ultimately becoming this horrific weapon of destruction. This one wasn't afraid to go for it, and I think that was something I really appreciated about it. Those are our rankings for all of Star Wars Vision Season 2. We're going to do final wrap up thoughts here for the season overall. Give you guys a quick score out of 5 for the entire season. Sanak, what were your thoughts here on Season 2 as a whole? And what would you give it out of 5?
Yeah, as a whole, I think the season was very consistent. I put something like the pit quite low for me. That should tell you just how strong the whole season was, because that still was an engaging watch. It did maximize its opportunities when they did arise in its storytelling. What's really awesome to see is that everyone in the world, regardless of where they're coming from, regardless of their religion, traditions, background, they all kind of get Star Wars in the same universal ways. And I think this season understood that a little bit more than season one. I'd say like my top two potentially could fit into like the top five overall for all 18 episodes of Vision so far. So for me, I think I would give the season a 3.75. Again, I think this consistency and then the peaks of this season are just enough to creep over season one.
I feel differently from you in the sense that I think overall, season 1, the highs for me were much higher. I still think the top 4 of The Elder, The Ninth Jedi, The Duel, The Village Bride, those for me are all stronger, I think, than anything we saw here. Maybe Screecher's Reach is the only one that could crack that like top 4. Visually, this season was heads and tails over the first season. While we have some great looking episodes in season 1, there's just a variety here that you don't really get in too many other animation compilations. I enjoyed this season a lot. I think I would give it the same rating that I would have given season 1 if we rated them back then. I don't think we did rate season 1 back then. I think I'd give it a 3.5. This season was all about that quality. There were a couple for me that I might give 4s. There were a couple that I would probably give 3s, but I don't think I would give any episode from this season below a 3. It's a tough thing to grade because they're animated shorts and they're all so different. So, to each their own. Every person's going to watch this and have a different ranking. We want to know yours. Let us know your rankings in the comments below. Let us know your favorite episodes, least favorite episodes, favorite styles. If you haven't watched our recap for the video game bracket, make sure you check that out. We covered all of the results of all the polls. We revealed the next poll, which is already out, announced for May the 4th. We're doing Star Wars characters. 80 Star Wars characters are going to be polled across a variety of polls, going across 5 rounds of our polling this time. So make sure you're voting for your favorite Star Wars characters so they make it all the way to the end. Also, stay tuned for a vlog of us seeing Return of the Jedi that is coming out pretty soon. And then we will also have a review for you soon of Dark Force Rising for our latest episode of Legends Book Club. Also, keep an eye out for our High Republic coverage, which will be returning pretty soon here. We promise it will be returning. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and we'll see you next time.